Good morning and welcome to today's corporate governance meeting, which as usual is going to be recorded and available for viewing after the meeting. First item on the agenda is the minutes. I propose that the minutes of the meeting are held on the 20th of May 2024 are taken as read, confirmed and signed. Is that agreed? Agreed. Question times. There have been no questions from the public. Questions received from members. There have been no questions from members. Urgent items. There are no urgent items. Now, do members have any declarations they wish to make in respect? Yeah. Thank you. Okay. Thanks very much. Thanks, Mr. Grimes. Thank you. So we'll note that. Terry.
Usual one, Lloyds Bank pensioner in respect of item 12, Treasury Management, which mentions Lloyds Bank.
Okay, thanks, Terry. We've received no presentation, so we're on to the first substantial item, which is the risk management update. Neil's going to introduce the report in a minute, but to begin with, we're joined by Anne Crothers, Director of Environment and Transport, and Victoria Coombs, Flood Risk Manager, who will be providing us with a presentation regarding flood resilience. Over to you, Anne and Victoria. So please go ahead, Anne. Yeah.
Apologies. Good morning, all. Helps if I put the microphone on. So slides are up there for you, if that's all right, and Joe's going to kindly drive them for me. So just firstly, I thought it'd be useful just as a quick reminder about the roles and responsibility of the lead local flood authority, which we as Leicestershire County Council are. It is a statutory duty, and what it gives us the duty to coordinate local flood risk management. There's a lot of misconceptions, I think it's fair to say, around that role. So if I just take a couple of minutes to just outline what that actually is. We have a duty to coordinate local flood risk management, and the flood risk management authorities are the Environment Agency, water companies, so the likes of Severn Trent Water, etc. Ourselves as Leicestershire Highway Authority, we've got a role in it, the district and borough authorities, and internal drainage boards. The statutory duty is to produce a local flood risk management strategy, which we have for Leicestershire, and that's fairly up to date. I think it was issued earlier this year, so we have a new one fit for purpose, and it's available on our website if you haven't seen it. We have a duty to investigate flooding incidents that trigger locally devolved thresholds or devised thresholds, and that's set out within that strategy. We have a duty to maintain a register of assets affecting flood risk, and we are also the lead consent body for works within or close to ordinary water courses. That's water courses that the Environment Agency are responsible for, known as main rivers. It's a complex area of flooding, I'm sure you've picked up already. And we're a consultee in the planning process for surface water management. I think the thing I would emphasise on that, however, is it does not give us a duty to resolve all flooding. We do not have that duty, and we do not have the ability to resolve all flooding. We have the duty to bring the flood risk management authorities together to consider the management of flood risk. Okay, so if I just move on to the first slide there. We'll just start as a quick reminder of Storm Henk, because what we wanted to look at some of the lessons that have come out of that in terms of improving our resilience around flooding. You'll recall, I'm sure it was very early into the new year, we had a significant storm event, Storm Henk, and that came on the back of Storm Babette, which was the October before, and very saturated land. The water table was pretty high. Storm Henk happened early in the new year, and to cut a long story short, a major flood incident was called across Leicestershire. If I move on to the next slide, then that just gives you an idea. Yep, we're on the right one. That just gives you an idea of where the heaviest rainfall was. The purple areas were heavier rainfall. However, we did have heavy rainfall county-wide. And just to give you an instance, the Wittock area saw about 40 mils in one day. That's half the whole December average. So in one day, so, you know, absolutely phenomenal amounts of rainfall in a very short period of time, hence the extent of the flooding. Just moving on to the next slide, Joe. I think that just gives you some of the, that just gives you some of that context there in terms of the intensity. So moving on to the next one. We saw, as I say, impacts countywide, but some of the worst areas were across Charnwood area. By just the extent of the work, you know, that third bullet point there about into the highways team, you know, what could we do to help? We had over 500 calls, 250 jobs raised. We're there in support, remember, of the emergency services. The fire, we're not an emergency service, but we were there to support the emergency service. So the fire brigade, police, etc., but we are there to support. Over 70 roads closed. That's quite significant across the county. And as you'll know, it's a very movable feast. Things happen quickly. Water rises, recedes. So to keep on top of that, you know, our crews were out basically 24 hours a day. And the bottom two bullet points there really shows you the impact. And I would say this is unprecedented across Leicestershire in terms of the numbers of properties that are affected. And the key thing, into the hundreds, I would say previous events, flood events, when I've been here, so nearly the last decade, not quite, but nearly, you'd maybe get 50, 60 properties affected. We're well into the hundreds there. And that bottom one there about properties internally flooded, that is the thing that really triggers either a Section 19 investigation where we as the lead local flood authority and those other flood risk management authorities will investigate what the causes of those flooding are. And equally, it also triggers government funding that's based on the numbers of properties that were internally flooded. Obviously, I'm sure you're probably aware, lots of properties can be affected externally, but that's not the thing that actually triggers either the funding or the investigations. Just again, to just break it down across the county where some of that impact was I mentioned Charnwood, but Blaby also saw significant numbers, Melton, Northwest. And I think the other thing we would say is we'd seen areas in these storm events affected that previously we had no knowledge of flooding ever being an issue there. So it really did, you know, impact on a different scale. As I say, areas that, you know, you wouldn't think of would have been flooded, no history of that, were being flooded out. I'm going to hand over to Victoria Coombs, who works in the flood risk management team. I know many of you know her, and she'll go into a bit of the detail about the recovery and then some of the lessons learned out of that.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. Yeah, so following on from Anne's slide, so we have obviously the devastating impacts of Storm Henk. We started the recovery process. That's probably the biggest workload element from the flooding for the team that I lead. So we had multiple multi-agency virtual and on-site meetings across the county. So that involves bringing together all the different responsible agencies. I've got a really lovely image in the slides that the leaflet that's available that demonstrates all the responsible people and who's involved in flooding, and that's a lot of different opinions and lots of people's diaries to coordinate, and obviously lots of affected communities. So just giving you a flavour for some of those communities. We also, that's not just all the communities we spoke to. We obviously were dealing with multiple requests, direct emails, etc. And then also the highways teams were out as well, performing clear up operation, additional gully cleansing, and even where highway drainage was operating as it should, the stormwater will have left detritus. So they were just trying to make sure they were functioning effectively. Next slide, please. So the numbers that were affected, we were reporting those at the line to national government, and there's the national government will enact the National Flood Recovery Framework when certain thresholds are met. So it's important that we pass that information accurately up the line. And the East Midlands was devastated, and some of our partner organisations were doing the same, and also they were able then to receive this National Flood Recovery funding. And that allowed residents to claim £500 to assist with recovery. That was administered by the district borough authorities. There was 100% council tax relief for a minimum of 3 months, again administered by district boroughs. And then as well, this allowed us to offer the £5,000 grant to help people become more resilient to future flooding. So they call it the National Property Resilience Repair Grant. Can't say that too quickly. And there are also grants and council tax relief for businesses too. And we opened up those applications as swiftly as we could. There were many hoops we had to jump through. So that was on the 26th of April, and this is open now to all affected residents. And to date, we've received over 100 applications. So if you thinking back to the numbers that were affected, that's only about a fifth so far that have come forward. And we're encouraging all residents that were affected to come forward and be part of that. We did also qualify for the recovery grant as well for Storm Babette. Next slide, please. In response, after the event, some of you may have dropped in at the public drop-ins that we hosted. We had 5 of them across the county, and we were represented by all of the key agencies that were impacted during the event. They were very positively received, and we had a lot of members of the public having face-to-face discussions, which we all felt very positive about, especially after COVID. We've tended that's tended to sort of decrease, so that was good. And some customers stayed for around 2 hours. We did have some feedback of which we've taken on board, and we're scoping that up now. Next slide, please. Back to Anne mentioned about formal flood investigations. So the impacts of Storm Henk have triggered formal investigations for many of our communities. And we are establishing which of those communities has formally triggered that criteria. We don't have the powers to make other agencies implement solutions where it's their responsibility. So through our formal investigation, we may identify actions, and we will work with those organisations to try and fulfil those actions, but we don't have any powers to make them do it. And there may be identified through the investigation that there may not be realistic or affordable solutions for all flood prevention. And that's a key message that we're trying to drive. And we're trying to find ways in which we can support those where that isn't achievable. And we've also had additional temporary resource to help us pursue these formal investigations. So on the screen, you can see the list of communities that we think are the worst affected that we know about to date. So the ones that are highlighted orange are those that we know currently have formally reached our formal investigation criteria through engagement. And we are intending to do a detailed report in our overall formal investigation report. Those identified as white, we knew about already, so don't formally trigger the current criteria, but we're already engaged with those communities and we have actions already identified. And those that are identified as grey, we're calling them almost like our watch list. As we work through those communities, we're identifying more and more properties, and they may or may not trigger the criteria. However, that doesn't mean they're not being looked into or investigated. It's about establishing which those communities have formally triggered our criteria. On the slide is the central point of the leaflet that is available, and that illustrates the different responsible bodies that went down really well at the public drop-ins, highlighting responsible organisations and bodies. And we're also working on an updated riparian land ownership guidance note. The amount of members of the public that expressed don't understand what riparian means. So we're working on trying to make that more accessible and understandable, tying it in with the Environment Agency's detailed document, Your Watercourse Rights and Roles, which is quite hefty, but obviously details all the responsibilities of a riparian landowner. So the key message that I wanted everyone to take away from today was that anyone can be affected by flooding at any point. I think Storm Henk highlighted that. It's been extremely devastating on the communities across Leicestershire. The weather is only going to get worse and in particular, I think the unpredictable summers that we have. I know Storm Hank was a winter event, and we expect wet winters. They will get worse, but also more intense rainfall. We can't be there everywhere all the time, and so it's important that we are prepared for it. We, the collective, everyone, to try and reduce the mental, the physical, the environmental, all the major impacts that flooding has. And we are taking steps to help improve resilience across the county. So we're organising some additional drop-ins in the autumn. Locations are to be confirmed. We're updating our website to focus on self-help, how people can actually take action to help themselves. We are further developing our guidance notes, as illustrated on the previous slide, and we are going to publish the results of our formal investigation as well as soon as we possibly can. That is a hefty amount of work. We've got a lot of actions to pursue. Just to note that whilst the report may not be published, we are still undertaking the action, so there is no delay with regards to the next steps for the communities. And that's, thank you.
Thanks very much, Victoria. Yep, Barry.
Thank you, Chair. And Victoria, thanks for the report. Obviously, you put an awful lot of resource in when we've had like Storm Hank and you're trying to recover and everything. And when you look down through this list and you look down private residence or business as a private owner responsible for the property. But obviously, when you take that back a step, there's a point at planning level when houses are determined whether to go onto a site is whether the site is suitable from flooding. Now, I served as 4 years as chair of planning for Harborough, so I've seen lots of applications come through, and when they do, lots of residents then start sending you in photos from 30 years ago when there was some massive flood, etc. But it's important information as we're getting into this new climate problem where we're getting worse floods. How much resource are we actually putting into the prevention? Because when you see like something like Storm Hank, and a lot of resource would have come in from yourselves to recover, but are you at the same time taking the opportunity to reach out to say all the parishes and say, right, now is the time to get out there, get photos, get information, send it in to us? Because there might be 25, 30 years before we see this again, but you're so busy trying to recover that you don't necessarily take advantage of the situation where you can gather all that information so that you can prevent that future risk.
Yeah, so it's worth just establishing the role of the LFA in the planning process. So we are a statutory consultee to planning for major applications, but we also try and pass comment where we can on minor applications. We know the communities that have been affected to date. We also have performed our assessment of local flood risk as well, so we know communities that are predicted to be at risk as well. So we try to, where we can, comment on those applications. But you're right with regards to data. We do encourage communities to come forward, provide that information. We take it all on board. We store it within our systems. So we utilise that when we do respond to planning applications. We're also engaged with our resilience team with regards to promoting flood wardens. And it's through there that we're encouraging communities to report information via them directly to us, or they can also send it direct to us as well for the flooding inbox, just to try and build up that big picture.
Terry. Right, thanks, Tom. Couple of points. You mentioned about the take up by residents, but if I'm correct, the £5,000 they have to pay out first before they can claim it back. So if you've been flooded and you've got no money, you haven't got the £5,000 to pay out. So one assumes, along with other councils, we're putting pressure on central government to change the rules, is the first bit. Following on from what Barry said, I think it was about 3 or 4 years ago in this very room, we had a really good talk from Severn Trent about water coming off of properties. And I think one of the issues is that when the determination on the planning is done for water from Severn Trent, and they're looking at other developments up and down the road, they're looking at what they presented at the time that development was built. So is there any monitoring of how much water is coming off those developments? Because one thing that was clear from the Severn Trent presentation was that as people tarmac over their front garden, put plastic grass out the back, most flash floods are now caused by people actually doing things to their own property, which causes water to rush off so fast that you get flash flooding. And of course, if a development that was calculated as X when it was first started being built turns out to be producing Y, not through any fault of the people who did the calculations, because they were probably correct when it was built, but because of what people have done since, I wondered how that could be taken into consideration. And thirdly, from the point of view of the county council, I mean, Littlethorpe in my division regularly floods, and has got worse over the years. But that flooding must have a major impact on the quality of our road surfaces. So is there anything we get back as a county to repair the roads that are caused? Because you talked about rivers. I mean, the river that runs through Narborough and Littlethorpe, I mean, you can barely see it. It's so overgrown and that now. So there's nowhere for the water to flow. And inaction by one agency will clearly put pressure on our infrastructure, particularly the road course, the bridges. I mean, you look at Cosby, for instance, the little bridge in Cosby, which is got 3 pipes under it, is always blocked, which is why it comes over. But that must put stress on the roadway every time it floods. And I just wonder how are we able to ask for assistance as a council in that aspect?
Chair,
Yeah.
if it's all right, if I start, and then I'm sure Tor will get into far more detail than I will. Just to your last question first, when we get flooding events like that, and then there's an ongoing impact on the highway network, no, there's no pot funding, nowhere we can go for that. We're having to just pick that up ourselves. Fundamentally, however, it just shows the overall challenge we have as a highway authority to adapt to climate change. It's not only water and the amount of water we see, it's heat in the summer when the roads begin to melt, etc. What is it we can be doing to try and make our highway network more resilient to climate change? There's no easy answer to that. All highway authorities are struggling with it. There's lots of work going on to try and understand what the best thing to do. But, in short, the answer to your question is there's no pot of money we can go to. We just have to absorb that as an extra cost when we're struggling to maintain our asset as is. The other point I was just going to pick up on, but I'm sure Tor will have more detail, was the impact of the runoff from a new development as people over time begin to change the nature of that development. The rules very much are about a new development has to kind of consume its own smoke. So there can't be any more runoff after the development than before, when it was a greenfield site or before it was developed. However, what people do over time, to my knowledge, is not monitored in any way. But if a further development comes along, that base case of what the runoff is on that area will take into account all the existing infrastructure and development around it, and therefore we'll have to take that into account. So not ideal, but because, as you say, things adapt over time, but ultimately new development should be accounting for its own impact in terms of flood. Tor, you probably get far more detail.
Anne's detailed pretty much the response I was going to give. Apologies. I think Severn Trent could probably give you a bit more information about the capacity of the FALM and the surface water network and how they their modelling and how they do that for future development. I know they have got capital schemes in some areas, and they work with us to try and reduce flooding in some areas, particularly if it's surface water running off fields or land into the FALM network or the highway network. So that's where it gets sort of cross-organisation projects. And also, just going back to your first point around the pressure on central government about the funding, we're very aware and about the strict parameters around the grant that came out. We were very vocal about that, and it's been very challenging to set up what we have, but we've put an offer out there, and we got it out there as soon as we could, recognising people need to start preparing and want to recover quickly and try and move on. And we are working with our partner agencies, all the various groups we attend, to put pressure on that. And I believe there are some murmurings about possible movements in that, thanks to the pressure of all the different LFAs across the East Midlands. But we encourage anyone that has been affected and would like to apply the grant to come forward, talk to the team, because we want to help in best we can. So if don't be put off by that initial outlay, especially with these additional murmurings. So if anyone in your constituency has that, please come forward.
Thanks very much. Neil.
Thank you, Tom. And thank you, Anne and Victoria. Can I also commend the publication of that leaflet? It's very good and at a glance is extremely helpful. I just want to seek clarification about the difference between a main river, which is the responsibility of the Environment Agency, and the ordinary watercourses, because many villages have got streams and brooks that flow through them. Terry's mentioned Cosby, there's Fleckney. In my own division, we have a brook in Broughton Astley, and they all are affected with flooding when we get these events. Can you just clarify the responsibility between these ordinary watercourses and the main rivers, which are the Environment Agency? And at what point does an ordinary watercourse become a main river?
Yeah, so we had a really good presentation by the EA on Saturday as well for all the flood wardens across the county explaining this. So the main rivers are predominantly the larger rivers across our region or across the whole country. And so, but it's also worth just taking a step back to who the Environment Agency are as well. So the Environment Agency are the strategic lead for flood risk management. So when it's really particularly major flooding, that's what they're planning for across the whole country. And they are mainly responsible for the large watercourses and the major impact they will have when they go, as we know, but also large reservoirs. But then following the flooding in 2000, there was a report by Sir Michael Pitt, and he basically looked at it and said, there's loads of flooding, it's more frequent, but actually we need to look at it more locally. And that's when he designated the lead local flood authority and the identification of local flood risk. And that's where I spend quite a lot of time explaining to people about that difference. So the main rivers, strategic flood risk and the big effect, and the EA would generally take the lead in those situations, like they did in Storm Henk across the whole of the East Midlands. But then we're leading on the smaller local impact, and particularly in those communities where they haven't got the big rivers, the big main rivers. So the Environment Agency have defined main rivers, so it's their list. They define it based on the impact, the numbers of properties, the amount of flooding that happens as a result of it. There are some smaller waters across the county that are identified as main rivers, and some larger rivers that are ordinary watercourses. So but it's a list that's hosted by the EA. In terms of responsibilities, it remains the same. If you have a watercourse through your back garden or through your land, you are the riparian landowner. The Environment Agency do perform activities on a lot of main rivers to try and protect the integrity of the strategic flood risk, try and reduce that through their activities and work. So hopefully that explains that it doesn't matter whose watercourse it is. The EA do perform some activity, but it's still a riparian responsibility. Does that help?
Is it possible to share these lists defined within the county, which are the main rivers?
Yes,
and which
the EA do have a
so I can find it on their website, could I?
List. Yes, I can share that.
That's very kind. But specifically on a stream or a brook, if the EA say, well, that's not our responsibility, we come to the lead flooding authority in that case. Okay, thank you.
Okay, David.
Yes, yes, thank you, Chairman. The leaflet is very interesting. Could I just pick up, very useful as well, pick up an item at the bottom right-hand corner, main sewer and wastewater sewer, Severn Trent. I mean, I've been concerned for a considerable number of years that Severn Trent are not responsible for all the sewers across the county.
I mean, if I'm wrong, please correct me, but I'm under the impression that we're now, with the growth agenda and the strategic growth plan and all the rest of it, we're now seeing a multiplicity of private estates everywhere, where the roads are not adopted by the county council. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's the situation, or never will be, or never have. And underneath the ground, the sewers are not adopted by Severn Trent. Please correct me if I'm wrong, but it concerns me that people buy houses assuming that somebody is looking after the sewers underneath them, and they're going to find out in a few years' time, when the ground starts to shift as it does in the county, nobody is responsible other than themselves or a property maintenance company which might or might not exist. There's a whole area of uncertainty about this, certainly in my mind anyway. And I can see thousands of people being caught out when something goes wrong. But I would like assurance, please, Chairman.
Well, I'm really sorry, Mr. Bill, but as you and I have discussed it a load of times before, I can't give you that assurance. You know, we're absolutely clear with developers out there the standard they need to construct the road to if they want them adopted. We will take them on if they follow that process and they construct them to that standard. If they don't, we will not take them on. And it will be entirely the same position for the sewerage. So it's entirely in the developer's hands as to whether they end up with an adopted road network and then, you know, the sewer system as well with Severn Trent. And it's something that, you know, residents, you would hope, are taking advice from their solicitors and from the developer, well, you know, primarily from their solicitors when they're purchasing properties. But as we all know, for various reasons, unfortunately, we end up with the estates there with the roads unadopted.
Chairman, that doesn't assure me. I'm grateful for the accurate reply, but what you can see in front of your house, if a road starts to crack up, you know there's something wrong, or these people will know there's something wrong, and presumably they will do something about it. But they will not know what's going on under the ground with thousands of houses being not connected. Well, they might be connected eventually, but not connected to a responsible authority such as Severn Trent. And I mean, in my part of the world, in the southwest of the county, the ground conditions are not stable. They never have been, but these estates are being built because we have to build them. And underneath the ground, nobody knows what's happening. So there's a problem there, which I think someone somewhere should pick up for future purchases. The original purchaser of the property might be aware that their sewer is not going to be connected, but will the next buyer and the buyer after that? Who knows?
I think it's a difficult one, and I think, as Anne has said, David, the builders, when they build the roads, know the standard of road that they have to create to be adopted by the local council. Now, I don't know, once it is adopted, does it automatically come into play that Severn Trent then become responsible for any sewers or anything to go under the road? There isn't anything that can be done, as far as I can see. If the builders don't build a road so that it can be adopted, then I do think you're right. It does leave it in a very open position, and the solicitors who are advising on the purchase of a property should advise if a road around is unadopted. But and I'm not trying to pretend I'm an expert, but I'm just trying to help you.
No, thank you, Chair. The only other thing I would offer is, you know, obviously in terms of a consent, you know, from the planning authority, drainage comes into that. If it's not built according to planning consent, there would be a matter for the planning authority to consider if there was any enforcement action to be taken.
So I've got Bill and Barry. So Bill, you were first, and then we'll go to Barry.
Thank you. Yeah. Terry's answered one or two of the questions I was going to ask, but it concerns me. If you've been flooded, you want to get the matter put right as soon as possible. Terry said you've got to pay the £5,000 up front and then claim it back. If you've not got 5,000, then you're struggling. One assumes that your property is insured. One assumes that, but a lot of places aren't insured, so that's another problem. So some people could well be left out in the cold over this one, literally, because they've got no means of repairing the property or drawing it out or anything else. So that's another problem. Dave's also picked on a point that local authorities are now having to produce local plans and say what they're going to build for the future, and it's a number of houses now we're having to build is quite considerable. So people are looking at what was previously a floodplain to build on. In my division, even though we said it floods, the environmental agency or Severn Trent said, "Oh no, it's fine, all right. It only floods once in 100 years, fine." They started putting the footings in, and then we have 3 foot of water on top of the footings because it flooded. So we've got a major problem here between what people perceive as being all right and what's actually all right. But of course, the experts don't ask the local people because we're just insignificant these days. So that's that one. I'm concerned about this because in my division, we've got an estate that's built fairly recently. Part of it's the road workers adopted and part unadopted. But then we've got conflict between people because their bit's adopted and the neighbour down the road is not adopted. So why are you doing work there, you're not doing work here? Well, it's trying to explain to them. I think one of the biggest problems is the solicitors don't explain to people exactly what they're buying. Because at the bottom of the form it says, on your instructions. If you don't instruct the solicitor, he won't give you the answer. But how many people out there don't know what questions to ask the solicitor in the first place? And that's the biggest problem, is that once you've signed on the dotted line on your instructions, that's it. Solicitor's not responsible anymore. But the thing is, ask the right questions. But members of the public know what questions to ask.
Thank you, Bill. Barry.
Thank you, Chair. Just coming back on a couple of points on this, I think the market's starting to work it out for itself, because what's happening with the new developments is people are moving into them. The solicitors aren't doing that great a job. The developers are pushing as much as they can. The adoption's not happening, but as these people are then trying to sell these properties, the solicitors of the new buyers are coming in asking for an indemnity insurance. My daughter's going through it at the moment. And so they're now people having to start taking out indemnity insurance to cover the fact if it's not adopted. And that obviously goes from the top all the way through the ground. So that's going to be the answer to that. The other thing is with this, I'm just wondering with this climate change and with this increase in flooding, have we got to a point yet where when the LPA, when we're going back to the LPA and giving advice on builds, to start asking them to look at materials chosen? Because if you start putting down resin-bound driveways, you're going to take acres of land that will be tarmacked over and make them, very absorbent. But if we start switching to that and like preventing people from further on down the line making changes, which then create more flooding, if it's just put in there into the planning rules that, start using the choice of materials, which an LPA can dictate or certainly push developers into, you could actually prevent a lot. I've just done mine as resin bound, and all the flooding I used to get has gone completely because it absorbs. So maybe it's time we look at like materials and things like that. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, thanks very much, Victoria. I certainly think that the face-to-face meetings helped calm the atmosphere. Clearly, people who have been flooded were very upset, and some in October, then were flooded again in January. But I think it really did help people to understand, and it clearly isn't a straightforward process, and you can't solve all the problems, and some of it will devolve to the property owners to make best defence against what there is there. Oddly, one of the questions, one of the sort of complaints I had was that the local resilience forum didn't inform the local council when there was a major incident call. But I mean, you'd be very difficult to be in the area and not realise there was a major incident, but it just seemed the process didn't go through to the local council. That may be nothing at all to do with you, but is there a way to make sure that they are advised?
Yeah, no, my understanding is the Local Resilience Forum has reviewed that. Sorry, when you say to the local council, do you mean to the parish council? Right, okay. No, my understanding is they have done a exercise to review some of the learning
Okay.
as well coming out of
Yeah,
this. So
yeah.
hopefully that kind of thing won't happen again.
Okay, well, thanks for your work on it. I certainly think Victoria must have very broad shoulders when you've taken the whole of Leicestershire and the vent of their frustrations and everything else. There is work and it will be ongoing. I mean, it's no good telling people it's a 1 in 100 years event, and we've had 2 1 in 100 years event between 6 months. But the reality of it is, who knows what's going to happen? Things are changing. And I think it was Barrett said it may not happen for another 30, 40 years, but the probabilities are it will happen again. But there's no getting away from that. Anyhow, thank you, Anne. Thank you, Victoria. Appreciated. So moving on to back to the main report. Officers have advised me that 2 of the pages in the published agenda pack are incorrect, and that in error, an earlier draft version was included. Pages affected are pages 25 and 27, and the correct version has been tabled today. I will ask officers to ensure the minutes reflect the correct version. So, Neil, over to you, please.
Thank you, Chair. Apologies about the error. So this is the routine risk management update report, and there are additional updates again on the work we do countering the risk of fraud. So I'll start paragraph 5 in the report. Just a reminder really for members that the corporate risks, this was at the request of the external auditor, are now aligned to the Council's strategic plan outcomes. For this cycle, paragraph 6 explains whilst there were no new risks added, the scores for 2 risks, firstly on cost of living crisis and the risk of RIDDORS has been reduced. They have been reduced, and both have been removed from the corporate register, but they'll be continued to be managed in the departments. Additionally, for the cyber risk, both the current and the target risk scores have been increased, and for all 3 of those risks, there are reasons provided for the changes. Just before we move on to the appendix, which contains the main updates, paragraphs 8 and 9 firstly explain that we've been updating our counter fraud action plans and including a new action plan going forward for 2024-26, and that's covered in appendices B and C. And finally, in the main report, just to mention that paragraphs 10 and 11, it explains that we are doing some additional work around our online mandatory fraud training. So unless there's any questions on that part of the report, I'll just go to the appendix A1, which I think is starts on page 21, and invite members to ask any questions on there.
Okay, you've all had the report. Has any members got any questions on the risk register they'd like to bring forward? No? Okay, so.
Thank you, Chair. So the only other thing we need to do with the report then is to just mention our risk for the next committee, which is, our presentation for the next committee, which is scheduled for the 6th of December. And we'd look back, Chair, and it was about 2.5 years since we presented on retention and recruitment. And since that period, there's been a lot of focus around agency, so that's risk 7.2. So there's been a lot of focus on trying to reduce agency and the adverse impact of agency spend. So we just thought it'd be worthwhile to bring a report back and a presentation by Lucy Lisselfair, who's the Assistant Director responsible for that, to the December committee.
Okay, thank you, Neil. David.
I'd have missed it, but is there any reference here to what, well, Declan's area of activity, and that is the threat of, well, virtually no mention of local government funding in the current sort of statements that are coming out of central government. Or we listened with bated breath to some mention of social services or virtually anything else that we're responsible for. Unless I've missed it, and it might be contained within these reports, have we? That seems to me the biggest thing, the threat of, well, getting into a Section 114 situation through no fault of our own.
Yeah, I think it's certainly not a risk which is limited to Leicestershire County Council. In fact, I think we're in a stronger position than most. But
shall I just start then?
Yes,
and can build on it. So for Mr. Bill, in the appendix on page 21, the first risk on there provides an update on the well, it's around the MTFS, but you'll see in the updates the government's announcement of a spending review, and then also there's no clear direction on the future of funding reform. But that they are updated references, but I do take it, and then throughout that appendix there are updates to the adults and children's risks, etc., on the funding. But did you want to add any more onto those?
The only bit I'd probably add is we've never brought that, if you remember, the MTFS to this committee as a presentation, just because it's covered off in so many different kind of presentations we go through the budgeting process. But I mean, if there are specific bits, we're happy to sort of expand on them.
Thanks very much, Declan. So, yep, Neil.
Apologies, Chair. I did have a question about the fraud awareness part of this report, particularly paragraph 10, which talks about the e-learning that's being taken up by the staff regarding fraud awareness. And you say completion rates are good, commensurate with those of other mandatory learning courses. Can you just define what a good rate of completion is? It is a certain percentage of staff that merits good, and does it leave open that there are some members of staff that by definition have not taken it up, and what's being done to encourage that mandatory e-learning to be completed by all staff?
You're absolutely right, Mr. Bannister. I think I'd need to go back and provide some additional information on where we are on that. I thought it may have been in here somewhere, but we can certainly provide the percentage that have completed. Some it's difficult for because of their locations, so that's why we're talking about other ways of getting the training out to people as well. But I'll certainly come back.
Thank you, Neil. Terry.
Sorry, Neil, just on that one, you said because of the locations, if it's e-learning, what does the location matter?
We just don't have, I think we mentioned a briefing, you know, if they're in school-based and places like that, they don't always have facility to use IT. So they, you know, we're finding other ways of sharing that information with them.
I would have thought through you, Chairman, the school was awash with computers. I mean, for the sake of them using one for 5 minutes.
We've got people like roadmen and, you know, things like that who are not really in the office and things like that. So,
yeah, I suppose in some ways, Neil, it'll be the ability to actually use the computer efficiently. That is possible, isn't it? Yeah, and understand it. Look, have we got any other questions? No? All right. So, moving to the recommendations then, which are set out on pages 18 of the agenda pack. We've got...
I'm fine.
Yep. It's now, Tara's going to produce the Christmas dinner now. It's not going to be... Right. Regarding recommendation A, the committee is asked to approve the current status for strategic risks facing the County Council. I'm happy to move this recommendation. Can I have a seconder? Thank you. Is that agreed? Yep. All agreed? Yep. Regarding recommendation B, as Neil has said, we're going to have a presentation on recruitment and retention. Is that agreed? Yeah. Everybody happy with that? Yeah. With regard to recommendation C, we will take the update regarding counter fraud as being duly noted. Agreed? Yeah.
Chair, can I just come back? I'd forgotten that Matt Davison, audit manager, sitting in the back of the room there. From Mr. Bannister, he's just informed me there's an 80% completion rate of the mandatory forward training.
Okay, that's useful. Thank you. Moving on to the next item, the annual report on the operation of the Members' Code of Conduct. We've got Lauren Haslam, Director of Law and Governance, will present this report. Lauren, over to you.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, members. Yes, this is the annual report. There were 5 complaints in total over the last year. There's a typographical error, I'm afraid, in my report. I updated the table after the report was drafted and neglected to update the commentary. So in actual fact, there were 5 complaints, not 4 as stated. One was not progressed as it was assessed on the initial review to be outside of the scope of the complaints procedure. But the person who'd made the complaint failed to follow up when I'd asked for more information to consider it further. They simply didn't respond. And so I've treated that as being not progressed. One was outside of the scope of the Code of Conduct and 3 were resolved informally. There are no trends in relation to the content of the complaint, nor in relation to the members who were subject to the complaints. 2 of the complaints were from members of the public and 3 were from other members of this council. All of the complaints were subject to consultation throughout with the independent persons appointed to assist and advise in relation to complaint matters. And just also to note that the independent person's term of office, with a panel of 6, the panel, their term of office expires later this month. Over the summer, therefore, we had a recruitment exercise, and I'm grateful to Mr. Champion, Mr. Bannister and Mr. Bolter, who all contributed to the recruitment exercise. And 2 new panel members are proposed to be appointed by the council when it meets later this year. 4 of the current panel members submitted applications to remain on the panel, and the recruitment panel were pleased to support that proposal. That will take the new panel, when appointed, to up to September 2028. The committee today is just asked to note the report, Chair, and obviously I'm happy to take any questions if there are any.
Does anybody have any questions on this? Neil?
Not a question, it's a comment really. And as Lauren has mentioned, I, together with Mr. Bolter, was part of the appointment committee on the 21st of August on the independent persons. I wish to spare the blushes of Mr. Grimes, but certainly for myself, in respect of all of the candidates that we saw, I was impressed with the quality and the experience and the commitment that those individuals are giving and are prepared to give for the new appointments as independent persons to assist this county council. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Neil. That's very reassuring. There are no other questions, so we are simply asked to note this report. Is that agreed? Thank you. So, governance arrangements, external bodies is the next item, item 9. Lauren Haslam will present the item. Lauren, over to you.
Thank you again, Chair. So the County Council is a member or participating body in a number of external organisations. And we resolved to include in this report those organisations listed in which the County Council has a key role, i.e. as a servicing authority or accountable body or host of a partnership. The government arrangements in the summary are set out in the table at paragraph 7 of the report, and there's been no significant change in any of the arrangements since the issue was last presented to this committee. Just briefly on the Freeport, as members will be aware, the County Council is the accountable body for the East Midlands Freeport. Work is progressing towards completion of the governance arrangements underpinning that, and the County Council's role as accountable body has been captured in the Memorandum of Understanding with DLUC. There's been some delay in relation to the finalisation of the government's arrangements relating to principally arising because of subsidy control complexities which have had to be resolved, but I think we're pretty much through that process now. Freeport governance is subject to external review by DLUC or obviously now MHCLG, and this committee will see that there's an assessment in the form of an assurance review took place in March with officers from DLUC. At the time that I wrote the report, the feedback had not been received, but very recently that has now been received, and there were 2 actions identified for the accountable body which we've got arrangements in hand to implement, but save for that everything was sort of positively received, and I think there was a recognition that we're in a good place. Just on finally on the Freeport, just to note the role of the accountable body doesn't have any executive functions, and that any decisions that affect the county council, for example, taking on the role of accountable body and the loan to the Freeport, are subject to cabinet decisions, and it's all subject to external audit. Just moving on to ESPO, no change to the arrangements since the last report to the committee, except a minor change relating to the role of the consortium secretary. On EMS, again, no change to the arrangements except a report to a change to the terms of reference, which I've referenced as taking place in March 2024. The report refers to the internal audit arrangements, but I think that's subject to a report later to the committee, so I won't touch on that. And then the final part, just moving on to the LGPS, just reminding members of the council's role as the administering authority for the scheme, obviously with the assistance from the local pension committee and pension board. And I've set out a bit of detail around the background, internal and external audit training arrangements, for the LGPS and LGPS Central. Finally, active together, County Council is the host authority responsible for the grant management and functions set out at paragraph 39 through a board, and there's been no significant change in those arrangements since this report was last considered by the committee. And just to conclude, Chair, reflecting on the significant overlap of the issues identified in this report with the annual governance statement, I'm suggesting that the future reports on this are only dealt with by exception if there's anything significant arising, and that most of the issues that I've touched on in the report, as they are already covered, as I say, in the annual governance statement, it's sort of a duplication really to bring them in this format. So I'm proposing, if you're agreeable, Chair, that future reports are by exception only. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Lauren. Does anyone have any comments or questions? Terry?
Yeah, could I thank Lauren for the update on this, which I know this committee asked for. I just wonder if we could go a little bit further, as we briefly discussed in the pre-meeting, that certainly some things which, like the very first one, the Freeport, which are decided by Cabinet, as it says, have had numerous meetings. So rather than just do it by exception, I just wonder if some of these things should actually be taken off this committee's responsibility, because they're looked at in far more detail elsewhere by other parts of the council, which Lauren has already referenced, and that should that require an amendment to the constitution, that's done. Because, you know, if county are looking at this, running it, they've got people on it, the same with ESPO, it seems that we don't have the information and detail they do, and therefore I don't think this committee can add any value to what our officers and members are doing in those other locations.
I'd be very happy to look at that, Chair.
Yeah, thank you. So, do we have any other questions or queries? So, we asked to note the report, and as Lauren has indicated, future reports, well, we will see whether, not only by exception, but really whether a responsibility which is taken by Cabinet and the items in it are covered by the annual governance statement, we defer any future reports unless there really is something significant. Are you happy with that, Lauren? Yep. Okay,
Yeah,
so
Chair.
is that agreed? Yep, that's agreed. So The next item is Local Government and Social Care Ombudsman update following consultation on the joint code of practice for complaints. We've got Chelsea O'Neill, Head of Complaints and Information Services, will present this item. So thank you for coming this morning, Chelsea. It's certainly a very involved report, to say the least. I'm sure we welcome the consultation. So over to you, Chelsea.
Thank you. Yeah, so just an update on the conclusion of the consultation, which was undertaken by the Local Government and Social Care Ombudsman on the proposed code. So as referenced in the consultation response document, there's been a number of changes which were made to the code, and a revised version has now been issued. So some key changes were clarification that the councils are not legally obliged to follow the code, however are expected to have a regard to it as advice and guidance. There's a significant change in the implementation of the code. It had been originally intended to be used by councillors from the 1st of April 24, and that the LGO would include it in casework from 25-26. This has now been delayed a year to allow for a pilot to take place, which launched earlier this year. The Ombudsman is now planning to apply the code into casework from the 1st of April 26. The code now clarifies that organisations should have an opportunity to resolve matters as a service request before a complaint is made, and the code is less prescriptive of how organisations should structure complaints handling teams, so providing a little bit more flexibility. The requirement for a written response at stage 1 has now been removed, recognising there should be greater flexibility in how organisations can respond. And then there was a change to the term for a stage 2, not being termed a review, and recognising that in some instances more detailed investigation may be required. So the current policy already mirrors the code in most areas, but there's some key actions required. So changes to the definition of a service request and complaint. Additional work is to be completed to ensure the complainants are given an opportunity to clarify their complaint. Further work required to track follow-up actions and ensure they are completed, and to ensure the council meets its duties to provide any reasonable adjustments. There's also a change in timescales for responding to complaints and earlier signposting to the Ombudsman where the council are in breach of these, and taking steps to ensure that all contractors or third parties work in accordance with the code. Another change will be the requirement to complete an annual self-assessment of compliance with the code, which will be reported to this committee, and to confirm governance arrangements for how member scrutiny will be carried out in the future. So all actions will be progressed through an action plan to enable the council to achieve compliance with the code by April 26th. I think that covers all the key updates.
Thank you very much, Chelsea. I mean, it seems so they are going to road test it before they actually enforce implementation of it, which seems sensible. Have any members got questions? Neil?
Just a comment, really, Chairman, and having read through this report and the appendices, it's good to note that the consultation had real merit, and that there were some positive responses to which were listened to and taken into effect. And as Chelsea's indicated, going to be road tested through the pilot. So I just wanted to make the point. I think it's a good example of the consultation process actually working, and seeing that the Ombudsman that have listened to the representations being made. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, I think that's a very valid point. It's always worth talking to people who have to work with these rules and regulations. I think that clearly has happened, and thank goodness it has, because the resources to man it would have been significantly greater had it not been amended. Have we got any other comments or queries on this? No. So the committee is asked to note the report. Is that agreed? Yeah. Okay, so we come over to item 11 now, which is changes to the contract procedure rules and financial procedure rules. Officers have been advised at the end of last week, we received notice that the implementation of the Procurement Act has been delayed to February 2025, and therefore consideration of the changes to the contract procedure rules will need to be deferred pending receipt of further government guidance. We will, though, still consider changes to the financial procedure rules as detailed in the report. Jason Furr, Technical Accounting Manager, will present this item. So, Jason, over to you, please.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So we're on page 117 of the pack. So this is changes to the financial procedure rules, some proposals. They're attached as Appendix A to this report, and the committee requests that they recommend the changes to the County Council that will be meeting on the 25th of September to approve them. So the financial procedure rules, they set out the main financial management requirements of the County Council. As it says in paragraph 3, they apply to the executive and the committees and to officers of the County Council. The financial procedure rules are supplemented by the standard financial instructions, SFIs, that cover the more detailed procedures required for the control of the financial affairs of the County Council. In order that the financial procedure rules remain up to date and relevant, it's necessary to undertake a review regularly and propose updates to the rules. A review of the rules has been undertaken recently, which has identified a number of small changes that are needed. And as I said, they're contained within Appendix A. So perhaps if we just go forward now to page 121, which is the appendix. And the proposals are listed there in a table over the next few pages. The first 2 pages are quite minor. They're just making it clearer. Some of the wording's being updated to ensure consistency throughout. On page 122, we've made a minor changement to Rule 19, redeployment or redundancy, to require the CFO, so the Chief Financial Officer, to be consulted where proposals of a new action plan result in additional costs. Moving on to page 123, Instruction 8 and Instruction 9 is around orders and payments, and again some minor updates to wording, but also updating to the Council's procure to pay policy. And we also have a new principle now of no purchase order, no pay principle. So that's just regularised within the standards, the financial procedure rules. There's also the paragraph F of Instruction 8, just clarification that Oracle Financials is the core financial system to be used for raising orders and making payments. Moving over to page 125, Instruction 11, stock taking, and Instruction 12, there's proposals to increase some of the limits. These limits haven't changed for many, many years. I've been around in this role for 15 years and none of these limits have changed in that time. So we're making some proposals to bring them up to date. So the changes there raise the limits to £5,000, so giving chief officers higher limits before they need to refer adjustments to the CFO. And similarly on Instruction 14 and write-offs, so this is on page 126, the limit for the Chief Financial Officer to approve debt write-offs is proposed to be raised to 20,000. So it's still being approved by the CFO, but above this limit, they'll then be referred to the leader of the council for approval. Turning the page to Instruction 15. Similar to procure to pay, we now have a new fees and charges policy, so that's being formalised within the instructions. And finally on Instruction 22, some clarification of wording there. I think that's been out of date. So the recommendation is the committee is asked to recommend that the County Council approve the amended financial procedure rules attached to this report.
Thank you, Jason. Does anybody have any queries on it? Neil? Sorry, Terry.
Thank you, Chair. I know on page 121, the second one, we say replace he, she with they. which I find a bit strange. But does it therefore follow then that on 124, page 124, we should have not himself or herself, but themselves? So this is the danger of replacing these things. We've got other ones where, so it's not just replacing he or she with they, it should be replacing himself or herself with themselves. And I'm sure there are others. I mean, is there any need to replace he or she with they, and on what basis? Because the knock-on effect it has elsewhere.
I'll have to take advice on that. I'm afraid. That's why, yeah, I was recommended to make that change, but I'll take advice before making the change.
David?
Yeah, I should agree with Terry on this. He or she is a singular concept. They is a plural concept. It's a clumsy way of documenting these things. I think if we could just look at it, it'd be worthwhile.
I think through you, Chair, the point I was making is we must have consistency. If we're replacing it, we can't then have himself or herself. So therefore, you know, somebody needs to go through the whole of the thing to find out what is the knock-on impact of this change on other phraseology. And it always worries me then we spend hours changing documents when I think most ordinary people would know what they mean and not be offended by them.
I take your point. Thank you, David and Terry. It's certainly, I think we get the drift of what the meaning and why it's there. It's just consistency. So has anybody else got any other queries that they want to raise? No. So we are recommended, we are asked to agree to recommend the proposed changes to the financial procedure rules to the County Council for approval. I'm happy to move the recommendation. Can I have a seconder?
Could we just have providing consistency within
Yeah.
phraseology is put in, because
providing consistent phraseology.
We don't want to take this to full council
Yeah.
with inconsistencies in it.
No, I appreciate that. So, subject to that, do I have a seconder? Yeah. Thank you. And all in favour? Thank you. So, the next item is Jason, I think this is you again, quarterly treasury management. So over to you, Jason, to report, to present the report.
Yep, thank you again, Chair. So this, the quarterly treasury management report for the current financial year 24-25. So this report summarises the position as at the end of the quarter, the first quarter mentioned. Paragraphs 2 to 8 are the usual reminder of what treasury management is, including the committee's responsibilities. Paragraphs 9 to 11 pull out the key points from Link. So Link are our treasury management advisor, and it's their latest economic summary attached as Appendix A. So the main headlines from that report are domestic inflation continuing to ease, with CPI falling during the quarter down to 2% at the end of May. And also GDP figures remaining subdued with no growth reported in April. So that was at the end of the first quarter, but turning to paragraphs 12 to 14, they provide an update on subsequent events since then. Obviously, we're now in September. CPI remained stable in June before increasing slightly to 2.2% in July. The next update for August's data will be later this week on the Wednesday, the 18th. During the last since the last quarter, the Bank of England have also reduced the base rate by 1/4% to 5%. This was the first cut since rates started to rise in December 21 and peaking at 5.25 in August 23. The next Monetary Policy Committee meeting is on Thursday this week, and it's uncertain at the moment as to whether or not a cut is likely. Obviously, the latest decisions in the US and the EU both seeing further cuts. A cut in the Bank of England rate is perhaps more likely now. Paragraphs 15 to 20, they summarise the position with respect to the Council's private debt and bank risk share funds. So we've got 4 of these. In First one is the 2017 Partners MAC 4 investment. During the quarter, 0.9 million of capital was returned. 3.5 remains invested from the original 20 million, and that's currently valued at 3.9 million. In respect to the second fund, the MAC 6 fund, a further 2.9 capital was returned, leaving 14.8 million invested, and 0.7 income was received during the quarter. The third fund, the Christopherson Rob Bank Risk Sharing Fund, paid income distributions of 1.3 during the period. And in respect to the more recent fund, the MAC 7 Private Debt Fund, there was no further capital calls requested in quarter one. Moving forward then in the report to short-term investments, paragraph 21. This shows that the balance of short-term investments increased slightly during the quarter from 403 million to 409 million. And during that period, 208 million of loans matured at an average APR, so the annual percentage rate of 5.42%. And 214 million of new loans were taken out at an average APR of 5.20. You'll see the weighted average maturity has increased from 113 days to 185 days. And it's worth noting that the APR on new loans is reducing, which reflects the expectation of base rates will continue to fall latter half of 2024. Turning on to over on my page to paragraph 26, this usual table shows the investments outstanding at the end of the quarter, and there's a couple of diagrams in paragraph 27 which shows how the funding is split across institutions geographically and by sovereign and institutional credit rating. Moving on to paragraph 29 and the chart below, the average weighted APR on the investment portfolio has decreased from 5.89% to 5.6% in the quarter. And that's again due to the anticipation of an upcoming reduction in base rates. Paragraph 30 explains that, and I think this was mentioned to the committee at the last meeting or last quarterly update, that one loan counterparty with Close Brothers Bank, a UK merchant bank, with whom the council had monies invested, had their ratings downgraded such that they were no longer an acceptable counterparty during the end of 23-24. However, there was a loan already placed prior to the ratings change, but that was fully repaid with interest on maturity on the 30th of April, so within this quarter. Paragraphs 31 to 33, there was an opportunity in April that the council took to repay an existing debt, a loan that it had to Barclays for £10 million, and we were offered a discount of 1.1 million for paying that back early. This reduced the council's overall debt position to 204 million, and it also has the benefit of reducing the council's over-borrowed position against the capital financing requirement. So you may remember from the Treasury Management Statement, the council has been over-borrowed because it's been repaying debt down through MRP, but it's not been able to repay debt itself. So that's now, that over-borrowing is down to £9 million. Paragraph 34, compliance with prudential and Treasury indicators. So these are set as part of the Treasury Management Strategy in February. And this appendix as well provides an update on compliance with those indicators at the end of quarter one. The latest forecasts these are all within the indicators except for one, which is the forecast of total capital expenditure for 24-25. And at the moment, that's around £10 million higher than the forecast made in February. That reason's due to additional government grants that have been announced since the capital programme was set and approved in February. So new grants get announced during the year. So it's not a problem, it's fully funded. It's just slightly higher than the indicator that we estimated. And then finally, on paragraph 35, we provide an update that was reported to the Scrutiny Committee as part of the period 4 monitoring as well. And this shows that interest received, or the forecast of interest received on Treasury investments, could reach 19 million by the end of this financial year against a budget of 14 million. And that's due to base rates being higher and longer than we were anticipating when we set the budget, and also average balances remaining high. So the recommendation is the committee is asked to note this report.
Thank you very much, Jason. Has any member got any questions or queries? Bill?
Thank you. Yeah, we've worked with Close Brothers now for a number of years. Will they be coming back into the fold in the near future? Because the number of people who can actually lend to is reducing over the years. You know, if we lose any more, we'll be struggling to where to lend money to.
Yeah, I think our advisors, they were downgraded and fell out of the fold. I take the point, but we have got a policy of who we can invest with, but and they don't meet the right criteria at the moment. But as soon as they do, I see no reason why we shouldn't use them again. I defer to you, Declan.
No, that's right. They were already on the sort of the maximum 6 months limit, so they were always on the kind of the riskier end of who we lent to, and use risky carefully because it's still not that risky. Although saying that close, I've got themselves into a bit of a pickle with some of the sort of their loans. So I think it's unlikely they'll be back on our lending list anytime soon, to be honest. They could do the turnaround, but they've got quite a lot of sort of debt issues, motor finance, things like that.
Okay, thanks very much. So if there are no other questions, we are asked to note the report. Is that agreed? Yeah, thank you. So over to the next item, which is item 13, the Internal Audit Services 24 to 25, progress and updates. So Neil, over to you.
It's one of the two audit managers, the County Council. So, thank you. So, starting the report, just to say, it's probably in 5 parts really. I'll introduce the 24-25 plan, provide updates on work that we've undertaken and the status of our importance recommendations, give you some information about the ending of the arrangement with Leicester City Council, and then I'll briefly introduce that we're having some new public sector internal audit standards. So paragraphs 4 to 6 really, a reminder to members on how the internal audit plan for 24-25 was going to be constructed, and what were the benefits of a more structured planning model, and what next steps were required. Excuse me. Paragraph 7 provides a summary, and then paragraph 8 a little bit more background on how the net resources available are planned to be utilised. So in short, we've got just over 1,200 days allocated to conducting the audits and proactive counter fraud work, and then almost another 250 days are set aside for managing the internal audit function, which includes servicing this committee. Appendix 1 on pages 163 to 171 provides a detailed list, if you like, of the planned audits for 24-25. That's the output from our planning exercise, and that was agreed with chief officers on the 25th of July. Paragraph 9, provides 2 further ways of analysing the plan, both by the department that we're undertaking the audit for, and also by a type of audit, and that they're all loosely defined. Some people would put them in different brackets. I've explained in the departmental listing, there's reference to a thing called consolidated risk. That's just an internal terminology that we've developed, which covers off audits that don't just happen in one department, they go across a number of departments, and also they are information technology audits are in there.
Yeah, I think we've got a couple of joined online. Yeah, just yeah. Okay, it's for another item. So has anybody got?
I've not finished yet.
No, I appreciate that. I just thought you were referring to the interruption.
Oh, no, it's all right. I didn't know where it was coming from. I realised it. Shall I carry on? Okay, thank you. Yes, so paragraph 10 onwards. So the first part really explained there needs, well, sorry, the rest of it really explains that there needs to be flexibility in this plan. So it was a plan for the whole of the year that was signed off in July, but there needs to be flexibility. And some of the reasons for that in terms of dealing with planned and unplanned adjustments are listed in paragraph 10. So there are things we have to take account of in terms of then regularly checking on where we are with progress, and also that we need to reprioritise some of those audits. So we do that with the Assistant Director of Finance, Simone, who's not here today. One of those happened recently. So paragraph 12 onwards just explains one of those that occurred, and we had a cut-off date, or a bit of a strange cut-off date, 14th of August to report, get some reports done. So I just give a little bit of an update there into how the audits have progressed, and some that are outstanding. A worry there that some are outstanding in relating to grant certifications. We have to do those anyway, so we will have to incur time on those. But then the other audits not started, we've then got to go through this reprioritisation process. So that is something that's we're going to be doing monthly, and then for the next committee in December. We'll cut off information at the end of October, and early November we'll create a position statement to bring to the committee. The final part on this section of the report, paragraph 15, just informs really that as part of all our changes, we are reviewing our key performance indicators, and again we'll build those into reporting to the committee. So that was the first part of the report. The second part of the report really starts paragraph 16. And Appendix 2, and this is the summary of the work that we've undertaken so far since we last reported to the committee in May. So paragraphs 17 and 18 are quite timely because our colleagues from Nottingham City have just joined us. So that's just a reference there that we had in the period of time over the summer. We received the final reports and we built those into my work on progress to you. I'm not going to dwell on them too much because obviously the people on the screen behind me are going to be covering those off in more detail. Just bear with me. The next part of the report is, or the third part, middle part, is about paragraphs 24 onwards. And this is just informing the committee about progress in high importance recommendations. There aren't any new ones this cycle, but it's a reminder that they stay in your domain, the committee's domain, until I'm satisfied that they're fully implemented and embedded. There's been some further extensions, which we always gain updates on. But a further reminder that the committee has an option at points if they wish to discuss whether they wanted to, call somebody to account for any delays. So that's that section. The penultimate section starts in paragraph 26. And this is just explanation that the provision of internal audit function to Leicester City Council has ended at the City Council's request. So I was the head of internal audit for the City Council for 7 and a bit years. Okay. The time taken to unpick that arrangement, has been quite impactful upon us, and it did affect some staff morale. But that's ended now. It ended. The new arrangement started for the 1st of August for the city. Paragraph 29 explains the outcome of the city's decision, and that was the overall loss of 3 employed staff and 1 agency. And then the final paragraph 30 of that section just explains there isn't really much for us to do constitutionally, just to inform the committee. Certainly the chair and Mr. Bolter as spokes have been kept informed throughout. And then just for the future, paragraph 31 onwards, just to inform the committee, obviously we work to internal audit standards. In May, we brought a report to committee to say that we'd been assessed, external quality assessed as conforming to those standards. We did reporting of that specifically at that point in time because we knew that they're bringing out new internal audit standards. So we wanted to be assessed against the current ones rather than have all the the impact of assessing against new ones, which they're being worked through. So part of that is a domain 3, and it's quite an important part of the standards. These are global standards that are being translated into public standards. So domain 3 covers off the governance of internal audit, both at directors level and chief officers level, and in terms of its audit committee. So there will be quite a sort of a few changes around that for this committee, and CIPFA is proposing a new code of governance around that that they're going to introduce. So I haven't seen that yet. I know it's in consultation stage soon, as will be a consultation on the new standards. So I think what I aim to do is they may write to you, Chair, they may write to Declan and Lauren as well. CIPFA may write to, if they don't, nevertheless, I'll bring something back to September. So I think that's all I have to say on the report. Sorry, it's quite 5 chunks, but I'll gladly take any questions.
So, has anybody got any queries or questions on the internal audit plan or any other item on the report? Bill?
Yeah, just got to find it, Chair. That's the problem. Could you explain to me the fallout between the Leicester City and ourselves? What caused that problem?
Yes, I can, Mr. Bolt. I mean, firstly, the arrangement was always available to be changed by either party. It was written into a very long delegation agreement, which was signed off, say, 7 to 8 years ago. Yeah. So it was always there for both parties. And over the years, I consider it worked well. We got both parties got the benefit of it. There was a change in management at City that had sort of different views, and we tried to work through those with City, but unfortunately I don't think they just took the option to try something else. So it's a test, really.
Okay, right, that's the first one. The second one is that I noticed in your report somewhere, page 154, these things are the paper, Chair, you can't mark them so much, can you? Item 10. Comment there, reduced resources. Page 153. 10.
That is just a standard, risk that is out there in terms of what's going to come now after the City Council has drawn the lost corresponding budget on that. So there's going to need to be a reflection on the size of the team, others, and what streams we also have to. So there will be an exercise later on in the report. I did mention that actually, that there will be an exercise undertaken with Simone to the size of that team. Reduced resources is a risk that is across everybody's budgets, in terms of not just internal audit.
Point is, Chair, we always insist that internal audit have sufficient resources to carry out their work efficiently and correctly. I'd hate to see their work curtailed because of lack of resources. Because it's an important function of the council to have this in place.
Yeah, I fully agree, Mr. Bolter. There's the planning methodology that we have reverted back to effectively does prioritise now where we're, so, and we have got information that makes us say, just haven't, either we have or we haven't got the resource to do that. So at least we can begin a conversation around that. Second thing is, I think there's going to be, as part of these revision to standards, eventually there is going to be some benchmarking and guidance issued. What is the de minimis level of resource for an internal audit function of a county council size.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Buckley. And they need the resources to be able to do it. About that. So, has anybody? Sorry, Terry.
Thank you, Chair. It's very just amused me. It's one of my pet hates, and it's on many places in the report, but page 170, I think, illustrates it highly. So we're supposed to look at what you're auditing, but I haven't got the foggiest what Operation Tootle or Operation Otto Wan are amongst many. So if we're going to have a report, and this is in the public domain as well, should we not understand what's being audited?
These are where we are required to get involved to some extent, either minimal or large scale in internal investigations or fraud investigations or whatever. So we firstly are limited into what information we can put in there anyway, because it's a public document. So if anything does end up with police, then obviously we might be interfering with the police case. I can provide. Ultimately, what happens is every one of those code names comes out in another piece of information at some point later on once we've concluded the investigation. So there's another part of the report. But nevertheless, I can provide a list of which ones they are.
I don't even think I need to go that far. If it just said fraud investigation to I'm perfectly happy, because then it summarises what it is rather than the operation.
We have an internal time recording coding mechanism, so it just shut with they're individual rather than lump them all together. But take your point, yeah.
If I just raised the point that I raised this morning with Neil, I think you were going to comment on, Neil. I'm trying to think. It was Appendix 3, wasn't it? Is it Appendix 3 or Appendix 2? Remember now?
It was
Appendix 2, I think, wasn't it?
Sorry, Appendix 2, yeah.
Yeah, it was just the word consultation and
the
fact that we appear to have signed something off when we shouldn't have done.
Sorry. It's the top of page 177, Mr. Richardson.
It's advice concluded.
That's right. So the use of the word consultancy, not saying it for a long time now, but it's a rather grandiose internal audit word for providing advice, providing guidance to others within our own organisation. It's a standard terminology. I think it's actually in those new standards is going to be refreshed into using a simple word like advice. But this is where this specific case is where we picked up from one of our colleagues, excuse me, in another authority, a specific way where a member of internal staff had defrauded on direct payments. So we picked up on that and then provided all the information, got more detailed information, and provided that to our own adults direct payments service to utilise that and see could that happen here. So that's what it is. So I have checked Mr. Harrison since Mr. Richardson since before when we met before. That work is we haven't closed down with the department yet. I know it says advice concluded, but we haven't closed down with them whether they've actually identified any issues around what we provided advice for. So we're still ongoing with that.
Yes.
Yeah, thanks very much for that, Neil. And it was really just the other comment I made about shouldn't there be some sort of timescales in that third column, because advice concluded could stay on there for the next 10 years. And so when will the action be taken? The same with the one below it that's got no timescale, etc.
Yeah, certainly the one advice concluded will not appear on, the advice part is concluded. The actual work around have they needed to take any action will still be reported.
Thank you, Neil. Has anybody else got any other queries and questions? No. So the recommendations are at the top of page 160 of the agenda pack. I'm happy to move that the internal audit annual plan for 24-25 be approved. Do I have a seconder? Thank you. Is that agreed? Thank you. We're also asked to note the update on work undertaken to implement high importance recommendations, the ending of the delegation agreement with Leicester City Council, and the full upcoming changes to the public sector internal audit standard. So we'll note that. Is that agreed? Yeah. So thanks very much, Neil and Matt. We now move on to item 14, which is the Insurance Services Annual Report. Neil, once again, over to you, and you are joined by a colleague who is...
This time I'm joined by James Colford from the Insurance Service Chair. So
welcome, James.
Welcome to James Committee. So yes, this is the Insurance Service Annual Report. It's the second time we've done this. But just to really start off, say paragraphs 2 to 4, there are some just some constitutional and operational background to the service. And then the report really starts at paragraph 6 for the work that's been undertaken this year. So this is the first major part of the report, and it's the report that there has been a major project undertaken almost since the beginning of the year, really, to re-procure the council's insurance programme, as the previous contract will come to an end on the 30th of September this year. So paragraph 7 explains that the council's broker, Marsh, was very confident that there'd be interest from insurers because the council is seen as a good risk to insure. So a lot of effort was put into early engagement with the market and provision of information. And the insurance service, James and his colleagues, they relied on colleagues throughout the council, and especially to its procurement team to get all the information ready. So everything was presented, and it was presented over 3 lots. And you can see paragraph 8 how we presented those. Paragraphs 8 and 9 excuse me, show that the tender was successful with a range of bids, and the broker was very, very pleased in terms of and excited for what was coming back. So paragraph 10 explains that at the time of writing this, we were in standstill. That standstill has now ended. And no challenges were received. So I can tell the committee that the council has appointed 2 new insurers. So they are Maven Public Sector for lots 1 and 2, and Travellers for lot 3. And there has been a considerable reduction in premiums. So what the broker envisaged has actually come to plan, which is great. We're quite excited. And I know James and the team have already started some good introductory meetings with the new insurers to onboard them into the organisation. So that was part 1. Moving on now to the actuarial review. So we reported last year that we were in the throes of receiving the report of the actuarial review. We unpicked that and went through some of the findings in there. And the broker who undertook the work, Gallagher's, was reasonably confident that we got good, sufficient reserves, and all of our claims handling capacity was very, very good. So they did suggest some reductions, and we've worked through those with Declan and Simone. And what we have done is we've certainly sort of reduced our top up to those reserves so that they're not being topped up more. And then there were a couple of small reserves which we just passed on really effectively. So that's been another good exercise, but again, I think it's something that we need to keep on top of in terms of our future levels of reserves. Moving into paragraph 18, this relates to the historical insurer that we had many, many years back, who went into liquidation, and so there are still claims coming out of the woodwork, historical claims that we have to either defend or end up paying. So the council has signed up to a scheme of arrangement with the administrator, and that means that we have to pay a levy on any claims that are paid out. So we pay 25% of the claims effectively. The final part of that section really just explains that every year they produce accounts, and then Gallagher's, the aforementioned broker, interpret those accounts and provide an update on what their views were. So that's included in there. The good news is that the arrangements seem sound, and there's no anticipation at the moment of a further increase on the levy, but that's always caveated every year. And then the final part of the report is just, again, further information on our claims handling service. So we do have two, excuse me, two very experienced and knowledgeable claim handlers who are not here today. What that enables is, and it has just been agreed as well with the new insurers who are coming on board, they give us a delegated authority to handle those claims. That generally means that we keep our costs down, and it generally means that we end up having exceptional claims handling responses. So we handle them from, as it says there, 26 cradle to grave. They do all the investigation. It cuts down our cost. We also then provide not just claims information, but we provide a lot of input into our other departments, James and the team. So Appendix 1 really just covers off the claims that we supplied in terms of the tender, and just gives a view of the picture in point in time of how the claims that we've handled over the years, over the last 10 years up to 2023. And then finally, Appendix 2 covers off where the service inputs into other departments, just some examples really of helping departments to mitigate their risks. I don't think I've got anything else to add on that really. It's been another good productive year really. Thanks, Jan.
Okay. So thanks for that, Neil. Has anybody got any queries or comments? Please, Nick. Terry, I'll get that.
I've been called knowing the things today. I'm changing my name every 5 minutes. It was only just trying to get my head round the chart on page 197. So these are claims which are being processed. Now, from memory, we have excesses on some of our policies. So what of those figures is our liability and what is the liability of the insurance company to those figures? And it does seem slightly concerning that over the last 3 years we've only paid out, well, we've only settled claims to the value of some 23,000, leaving us with the best part of $1 million odd outstanding. So why is it taking so long to process these? Is it because they are that complex, or is it because, you know, they've been caught up in other things? Because I would hate for us, for a local authority, reputationally not to be paying out when we should. We should certainly fight when we should fight, and I'm totally beyond that, but behind that. But I just didn't understand these figures about what is our liability as a council against the insurance company's liability.
Yeah, sorry. So yeah, the excess deductibles aren't included on that chart there, but essentially for public liability, it's currently 425,000 deductible excess, and the same for employers' liability, it's 425,000. That we're responsible for that amount, up to that amount, and then above that, the insurer will be involved.
Chair, is it possible to understand what is our liability as a council on these figures? So it says we've got, whatever it is, 4,304,907 outstanding. Oh, sorry, it's 2,696,000 outstanding. So how much of that is our liability and how much of that is the insurance company's liability?
Yeah, so we could take that away and bring that information back if that would help.
This is from the actuarial system.
No. Yeah, this is the insurer's report for the tender. Sorry, the broker's report from the tender.
Yeah. Sorry, John, just tell the chair that.
Yeah, sorry. So this report was compiled in respect of the insurance tender that was submitted to the insurance market, so they could see what the whole exposure was to LCC, not just within the insurer's exposure, but the entire exposure below our deductible.
Sorry, I think what we can do from this is either provide something from the actuarial valuation, or we can unpick, because this is just the output of the source information that we have in our claims handling service. So for each one, the summary totals on they're all picked in very, to lots and lots of information that shows our liability, the insurer's liability. So we'll be able to provide some information. privately by email. We don't want to bring anything out into the public domain now.
Okay, thanks. If you, all the committee, they could provide that, that would be great. Good point. So, are there any other questions or queries? No. So, we are asked to note the report. Is the committee happy to do that? Yep. Okay. So we come to the final item, which is item 15, the East Midlands Shared Services Internal Audit work undertaken by Nottingham City Council. Neil's here as Head of County Council Internal Audit and will introduce this, but we also have Rajiv Daggupta and Parma Datta, who is the interim Head of Internal Audit at Nottingham City Council, joining us online to take us through the report. So welcome Rajiv and Parma, and we are await.
Yeah, just to explain, obviously a report came to the May committee saying that there'd been some delays in finalising the work off for 23-24. That information has now been received, and that enables, as I do here, once you've concluded your work, it enables you to provide an opinion. So that's been done. So, and then my cover report just explains some of the other progressing that we've done in between the May and this committee in terms of writing to Nottingham City Council to try and gain assurances on future arrangements and currently the current 24-25 years plan. So I'll just pass over, I think, to Rajiv and his colleague, and leave it to them.
Okay, so over to you, Rajiv.
Thank you. Firstly, my apologies for not being there in person. I was in the joint committee in the morning, and I've just come out of there. And I'll give you all a feedback on the joint committee, what came out of that as well. Just a quick introduction. My name is Rajiv. I've come on board as of the 3rd of September. 2 days a week. Parama is also here, and between the two of us, we are looking to re-baseline the NCCIA function, and one of the things that we're focusing on is to ensure that the EMS audit plan is delivered appropriately, on time, and in full compliance with public sector internal audit standards. If I take a quick step back into 23-24, having stepped in, and I've seen a lot of the communications that have been gone on, there is, I think, 2 or 3 main things that I wanted to bring to the committee this time. Firstly, it is that, yes, we did have a lot of staff shortages, and we continue to have staff shortages, which has impaired our ability to provide a robust and timely service to EMS in 23-24. Now, to address that, what the council has done, and Parama and me are also ensuring that, is firstly the availability of senior resources to oversee quality control and ensure that work gets done on time. That is why I'm here. That is why Parama is here. What we have also done is there's no hiding from the fact that 24-25, there is no way we will be able to deliver the EMS audit plan without supplementing our resources. So we have reached out to external vendors to begin to get quotes to bring in additional resources to work with Parama and me to deliver the EMS audit plan for 24-25. So the main bits around leadership, oversight, quality assurance, compliance with standards has already been handled with Parama and me already here. And the resources are also being handled as we speak. We should get the market feedback probably I think today is the deadline. So by tomorrow, we should start getting a view for the resources and bringing them on board. Another thing I picked up from looking at things in the past is that the level of work and the depth of work, there was a lot of follow-up work done previously. And that was an element of concern. I can confirm that for 24-25, there will be no follow-up as an audit. All audits, the 4 audits on the plan, that's accounts receivable, accounts payable, HR, payroll, and IT, will be full audits with obviously a line item in there, follow-up of audit recommendations. Follow-up audits are not audits. Follow-up is an integral in Parama and my simplistic world. It's an integral part of an audit in itself. So that is, and what we're also aiming to do is to handle the timeliness aspect. The intention is to pick up 2 of the audits between November and January. So commencing field work in November, delivering the report by January, and 2 others commencing field work in January, reporting by March. So the aspiration, and actually not the aspiration, I can even say the commitment will be that we will have the EMS audit plan delivered full audits by the end of the technical end of the financial year, which is the end of March. In addition to that, and this came out from the joint committee in the morning. Councillor Wooding suggested that given payroll is the one where there is limited assurance, why don't we pick up payroll first instead of some of the others? And that is a very good spot, which we will definitely do. We'll pick up payroll as part of the first tranche starting in November and move it through initially. So if there is anything to be picked up, we can pick that up in the other side of the new year as well. What we've also committed to the joint committee in the morning is that we will engage with EMS and LCCIA on a monthly basis to keep everyone updated on what is happening, what is moving, if there are any delays. So things can be noted right up front rather than you get a 22-23 opinion in 24 and a 23-24 opinion in 26. That just can't go on. So that is the commitment that 2 of us can currently give you. And this is the update, the live update as of this morning. So
thanks very much, Rajiv. It certainly has been a big concern. Essentially, what you're suggesting is the audit, well, full audit will be completed by March 2025, as long as you are able to outsource some of the work.
Yes, but there's no alternative to that. We have to get.
Appreciate that. You haven't got the resources. And that's really what's concerning the committee. We wrote back in June, and it took 2 months to get a reply. And really, the only reply that came through is that you were going to produce a plan, which you obviously in the joint committee today you have done. And certainly we would welcome officers between Nottingham City and Leicester City working much more closely, because despite repeated requests to work together, that has not helped. Nothing has been forthcoming. So really concerning. But look, very much appreciate your report. Take on board exactly what you're saying, but it is subject to finding the resources to do it, which does leave a concern there. But you've been honest with us. We see where we are. Right, members of the committee, has anybody got anything they'd like to add? Yeah, Terry.
Just if I may through you, Chair, I assume that whatever the tender you go for, that the commissioners have approved that expenditure, or does it have to go back to the commissioners for that expenditure to be approved? Or is this solely a council decision?
This is currently Shabana Kausar, who is the Deputy S151. She's already signed off the going to market, plus our budget, the council budget for internal audit. We've got so many vacancies this is something actually Councillor Woodham's picked up in the morning, that a part of the budget can be, we're going to have to get resources. So a part of the budget can come from there. But do I have a straight answer for you right now in terms of is it funded? I don't, because I'm not aware. All I do know is that the Deputy S151 and the S151 are both aware that this is an expected cost that will need to be done for us to be able to deliver a decent service to members.
Thanks very much. So really, the cost is likely to be greater than you've budgeted for already. And I accept what you're saying, and that's a realistic view. But it presumably does need approving by the commissioners as well as Section 151 officer, because they're in charge of Nottingham City Council.
I would expect that, but in the same breath, we're also looking to resize, or not resize. Resize is the wrong word. Right size the IA function. So we are reviewing the IA function as we go on to ensure that we're able to not only do NCC IA work properly, which has also suffered in the past, and the EMS work. So I'm seeing the whole thing as coming together, and I have to do that over the next month or two, or else we're not going to be able to do any internal audit work for 24-25.
Yeah, absolutely appreciate that. You've been in post since the 3rd of September. You've obviously done a lot of work, but yeah, I think it would be good to have, I mean, this in writing, and really we want to keep on top of it. The monthly correspondence between both sets of officers, it is vital, because appreciate what you said, appreciate your honesty, but we do need some reassurance in writing, and we will resolve to that. Has any other member got any other questions or not? Neil.
Just Chair, I mean, part of the report today was to cover off the head of audit opinion for 23-24. So we haven't we sort of veered off into talking about 24-25.
We have.
I just wondered whether Rajiv just wanted to give a couple of sentences on 23-24.
Rajiv, if you're able, could you give us a little update on the 23-24 audit outcome?
Sure. For the 4 audits performed in 23-24, 2 were follow-up audits, 2 were full audits. Based on the assurance conclusions, there has been positive direction of travel on IT, but overall, based on the reports, and please, I'm not trying to have sloopy shoulders here, but this was work done before my time. I'm suggesting a conclusion of moderate assurance based on the 4 for the 23-24 period, noting that 2 of the audits were follow-up audits.
Yep. Okay.
Now, again, it's worth mentioning, as of Friday, Neil and Matt have raised a few questions on some of the audit findings, which we are going to respond to them this week. I don't see the opinions changing per se, but those are valuable questions and comments which we can focus on for future years.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Yeah, could I just confirm that, Chair? So Matt and I did raise some further questions on trying to understand how the opinions had been reached, and Rajiv's absolutely correct. In fact, John Slater from Nottingham has already provided one response to us ready for this committee should we need it, but I don't think we need it now. It's a case of just internally between the auditors.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Thanks very much. I think I would propose to the committee that a letter be sent jointly from myself and the lead member for resources to the cabinet member for finance and Nottingham City Council, copied to the respective chief executives, chair of the audit committee and the commissioners at Nottingham City Council, to provide us exactly as you said, Rajiv, what the plan is, where we're going, that we can get certain work completed by a certain time, and monthly updates as to where we're going with the procurement of the outsource resources and the cost, and the fact that the cost is recognised and accounted for by the commissioners, by the council in general. But is committee happy to do that? I propose that. Is everybody in favour? Yeah. Look, I appreciate you've only been in post, Rajiv, for the 3rd of September, and it must have been quite the last 12 days must have been very interesting. And we'll wait to hear, but I absolutely understand. You've got to have a plan. You've been honest with us, and we just need it in writing. And we do need the monthly update and also the officers to work together, because that just has not happened up to now. But look, thank you both very much for coming along this morning, and we will no doubt talk again. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. So, apart from what I've just said, the committee is asked to note this report. Is that agreed? Yep. Okay. The dates of the future meetings for 24-25 are set out on your agenda, and invites will be sent out in due course. As previously stated, there are no urgent items. I therefore call this meeting to close, and thank you all for your attendance and input this morning. Thank you.